Hello, my name is Jessica Bickler, class of 2012. Today is March 15th, 2012. I'm here with Bonnie Henry, and class of 1963. Let's get started. Can you talk a little bit of what South Tucson was like when you were growing up?
Well, it was a close-knit community the way I think it still is today. I grew up in what they call National City, which is between South 6th and South 12th and Ajo Way and Irvington Road, just about in the middle of that. And all the streets were named for states like Illinois and Kentucky and Nebraska. And our street was the exception. It was named MacArthur, and I guess that was for the General MacArthur who had just won World War II. And it was right after the war, and a lot of young families were moving in, building their own houses. That's what my parents did. My dad bought a little lot, and he and my grandpa, who was in construction, they built our house, and that's where we grew up. I felt it was very safe at the time, a lot of working families. We walked to school. I walked to Pueblo, which is probably a mile away, every day back and forth. Of course, I always had a lot of friends we walked with. It was just a fun time, and it was just a good place to grow up.
Do you feel like it's changed?
Yes, I have. And it's not fair to say a lot because I see the changes as an outsider now, and that's not always fair. But I do read about, you know, the shootings and the things that we never thought about when I was a kid, and that's too bad. My parents lived in the house for years. My mother loved it, had so many friends in the neighborhood, and some of those families stayed there till you know, the mother and father died. We finally convinced my mother to move because the neighborhood was not safe. A man had jumped over the wall and jumped on my dad one night, and they were finding needles in the backyard, and it was just, and she really hated to move, but they did sell the house and they did move to near St. Mary's Hospital, a little housing development in there. So I'm really sad that it has changed, and I'm sad that it has gotten sort of a reputation that it has, whether it's fair or not. You know, every night it seems like on the news they always say, you know, a body found, and it seems like more often than not it's the South Side. But of course the South Side has expanded greatly. Now when they say South Side, they may mean Midvale Farms. And when I was growing up, Midvale Farms was a farm. There were no houses there. So that, I think, is part of it. It's a much bigger geographic area than it used to be.
Okay. What major historical periods or events or crises were going on when you were attending?
Oh, a lot was going on in the early 60s. I started Pueblo in the fall of '59, and of course we had President Kennedy elected the next fall, and that was a big deal. Even though we couldn't vote then, you couldn't vote, you know, until you were 21, but it was a big deal to have him so young and handsome, and his beautiful wife Jackie. And we're just starting the space race with the Russians, so we had just the beginning of the astronauts going up into space and all of that, and we thought that was very exciting. And Pueblo was really getting into that because there was this big push for science, so they taught Russian here at Pueblo High School, and physics and calculus and all kinds of classes that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think now you've got to go to Pima College or someplace to get those kind of courses. In 1962, the fall of '62 is when I was a senior, and that was a very scary time because we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we really thought we were going to have a nuclear war with Russia. And I remember the last day of school, I was a song leader then, and all of us were in the gym class, and we were talking with our teacher and everything, and all of us were like, we didn't know if we were going to see each other ever again over that weekend. It was a very scary time. Civil rights movement was just starting, a lot of things going on there, so it was a very exciting time in the early '60s.
Wow, I would have liked to have been around that time.
Well, it was exciting.
What were the students like when you attended Pueblo?
We were a very diverse student body. I think at that time we were probably about 50% Mexican American or Latino or whatever, you know, the term that's used today, and about 50% Anglo with a smattering of African Americans, and we had some Chinese in the Chinese Americans here too. I know when I was here one year, our student body president was an Anglo, and the next year the student body president was a Chinese girl, and the next year it was a Mexican American. So we were extremely diverse, and just I thought, I got along well with everybody, and it was a great place to grow up. It was much more strict than it is. The girls had to wear skirts or dresses, no slacks, or I think you could wear jeans during rodeo week, and that was it. No shorts, no flip-flops. I think we were allowed to wear what they call spaghetti strap dresses. I'm not sure, when it was warm weather, but it was fun. We had dances on Friday nights. We had football games, and after the dances, after the games, they would have a dance in the cafeteria. I think it cost I think they said 35 cents stag, 50 cents drag, meaning you brought a date, and they just played records, and they had punch, and it was kind of fun to do, I think it was a wallflower more than anything else at those dances, but it was still fun to do. And we had homecoming. As I said, I was a song leader. I had a blast my senior year. I was a song leader, and I was on the paper, and just really, really had a good time. I think most of the kids did. My yearbooks now, when our kids, a few years ago, do you remember the TV show called Happy Days? Well, my kids got a hold of my old yearbook, and they said, "Mom, you were just like Happy Days." And that's really the way it was.
What do you remember being the most difficult part about high school back then?
Other than your usual teenage stuff, like I was always a foot taller than the boys, and that kind of stuff. Difficult times. I don't know. I didn't really have a lot of trauma, and everything was a pretty happy time for me. I tried to get along with everybody, and had quite a few friends. I didn't date a lot, which was fine, really, and just was in a lot of activities. And I was lucky. I didn't have any real problems with school, although I was smart enough not to take calculus or Russian or chemistry. I took the easiest classes I could take that would get me into the University of Arizona. I remember Coach McCaw. He was a track coach, and most of the coaches, of course, taught other classes, and he taught math. And he said, "You're never going to really learn algebra, but I'm going to pass you." So it was just sort of a relaxed time back then. So anyway.
I wish I had it that easy in my math class. Is there something that will always remind you of Pueblo?
Oh, lots of things will remind me of Pueblo. The fiesta. Do you still have the fiesta here?
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Kiedis and her Mexican food booth, just wonderful. We just, Mr. Guerrero was here, and just so many things. And the fiesta was the first date I had with a boy from the senior class who would become my husband. So that was our first date. And so that was fun. I'll always remember the football games. I think it was the year before I graduated, in 1962, we won the state championship, and that was a big deal. So I remember marching in the rodeo parade, and it was so hot, and just lots of fun memories.
What would you say to people who have a negative impression about Pueblo?
I would say come and learn. Come and visit the school. Come and talk to the kids. Come and talk to the teachers. Find out what's really going on instead of just maybe reading some little snippet in the paper and drawing conclusions like that. Because I think from what you're doing with the alumna and everything, that there are a lot of people who graduated from Pueblo who went on to very successful lives. And I think just about all of us can point to the time in our lives when we were becoming young adults and trying to figure out what we wanted to do with life. And Pueblo is where we learned some of that from the teachers here and from the lessons that were taught.
Do you have any high school regrets?
High school regrets, other than not learning algebra? Not really. Not really. I think I got out of high school all I needed to and wanted to, and I think I gave a fair amount back as far as activities I was involved with, and not really any real regrets. No.
What was your senior year like to you?
It was a blast. It was an absolute blast. I became a song leader for the first time. I don't even know why I decided to become a song leader. I think it was, I thought, well, I could go to the games for free. I don't even remember why, you know. But anyway, I had to practice this little routine and figure out a little choreography step. Do they still have song leaders here? So I had to do that, and I'd always been on the school newspaper until I was editor that year, and we won a state award that year. So that was real exciting. And I made a lot of friends. I started dating a little more. As I said, I met my future husband toward the very end. I got to go to the prom, which was a lot of fun. So just all that fun stuff.
Do you have any advice for current seniors?
For seniors?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, by the time you're a senior, I would hope you'd had already taken advantage of a lot of the opportunities here, that you'd taken the right classes, that you're already thinking of what your goal is after high school, whether it's college or vocational school or technical school. And you know, that was another thing. I don't know if they have that now, but when I was here at Pueblo, they had a whole range of vocational studies here. And you could graduate one day, and a week later you could be working a 40-hour full-time job as a secretary or a carpenter or a mechanic. They had, I remember the whole South Wing was all vocational. I remember some of the girls graduating from here, and they would be working in the office the next week, and not just as helpers, they would be full-time secretaries or whatever, because they took shorthand, they took typing, they took all that. So my advice would be to try to learn as much as you can about all the different avenues where you might be going. Ask for advice from your teachers and your counselors, and especially, of course, if you're going to college, figure out how you're going to pay for it, or how your parents are going to pay for it. You know, study up on those Pell Grants or scholarships or whatever. I went to my first year at the university on a scholarship from Pueblo. Paid half my tuition, and do you know what my tuition was for a semester at the University of Arizona? $125.
Oh my goodness.
And my scholarship was half, so I paid $62.50 for my first 2 semesters at the U of A.
Oh my
Yep.
goodness.
Yep.
I don't even want to hear
Oh,
that
I
one.
know. It's terrible. I wrote a column about it this last Sunday about how awful it is now, and
Yeah.
the increases. Yeah.
What would you have for advice for current Pueblo students?
Well, it would be the same thing, I think. Just pretty much the same thing. In your freshman and sophomore years, I know when you're 14, you think you'll never get to be a senior. It just lasts forever. And I had a little bit of a sophomore slump, you know. Nothing bad or anything. I just kind of, I don't know, just kind of withdrew a little bit and wasn't as involved as I would become later. So just take advantage again of everything to offer, and if something doesn't work out, then try another avenue. Okay, so maybe you're not good in chemistry, maybe you're going to be really good in journalism or whatever.
How do you feel personally about the mascot change?
Well, that's a funny thing, because I was here at the school when we first adopted Wally Warrior, and I think he was a 14-year-old freshman. My yearbook, I should have brought my yearbooks. And he was a 14-year-old freshman, and he was small, so he was perfect. You know, we had the whole outfit for him. And it would not have dawned on us in a million years that there was anything politically incorrect about that. You know, it just would not have at all. And I know it got to be a big brouhaha later on. What is your mascot now?
It's the wolf.
The wolf. Because for years wasn't it sort of an Aztec-looking?
It was the
warrior, or?
Aztec warrior until the early 1990s, when they completely removed our mascot, and we just had the warrior logo.
Okay, and why did they remove even the Aztec? They figured.
They felt it was still politically incorrect.
Okay.
And still racial to some
Yeah.
of the students.
Yeah, you have to be very careful these days. It just didn't occur to us, and there was certainly never any thought of an insult or anything like that. I guess we just were just a more innocent age, and it didn't. And you know, if anybody was insulted about it when I was in school, boy, we never heard. And I think we had to vote on it, but I don't remember what the other options were. I think it won out because it was so cute with his little pot belly and everything, and everybody just thought, "Oh, that's so cute," you know.
Yeah, we had a couple of options last
Did
year
you?
too that we had to vote on. I believe there was a panda, dragon, the wolf, and I'm not too sure of the next option.
Well, the wolf is obviously probably better for football.
Yeah.
Pandas are kind of cute and yeah,
fluffy.
yeah, cuddly, yeah.
Yeah. So you've had a long, successful career in journalism. What is the most important story you've written that you feel?
I've written a lot of stories, a lot of feature stories. I was lucky enough to do a lot of historical stories about Tucson. I would think probably was in the spring of 1994 when we were coming up on the 50th anniversary of D-Day. And we thought we'd do a little story on anybody who might be living in Tucson who had been at Normandy, the beaches of Normandy during D-Day. And we put a little notice in the paper, and we were just swamped. It was amazing how many men, and even a few women in peripheral roles had been there. We ran stories, 3 stories a day for a month on these men, and they were so wonderful, and they came in with these just incredible stories, and it was before we had the internet or anything, and a lot of them came in, and we had a little phone hookup, and they would tell a little bit of their story on the phone, and then readers could dial a number and hear it in their own words. And we took pictures of them, and they brought in old pictures of themselves. And so many of those men had said that this was the first time they had ever talked about it. You know, when the war was so horrible, and when they came home, they just wanted to forget it and get on with their lives, get married, raise families. And they realized time was running out and that these stories needed to be told. And it was just an amazing, gratifying experience for me. And these men, because it was the 50th anniversary, some of them went back to Iwo Jima in the Pacific. One man brought me back black sand from the beaches of Iwo Jima. Another one went to a reunion in France, and they gave them all bottles of wine, and he brought me back a bottle of wine, a special anniversary, which I have not drunk to this day. I just save it, you know. So it was just wonderful to meet these men and tell their stories, because they really were the greatest generation, and they're dying at like 10, especially now, 10,000 a day. So it's just wonderful to have been able to share their stories.
That would have been really nice to see.
Yeah.
Do you still have any of those newspaper articles with you?
I didn't bring anything with me. They're all, of course, in the Star archives. I think they're even still on StarNet now. I think StarNet was just getting started, and I think we have them there. And of course, at any library or at the Historical Society, you can look them up. If you go down and just look up May of 1994, you're going to see the stories, because we ran all through May, right up to D-Day, June 6, 1994, we ran the stories. And then even occasionally after that, and it was like a year later, and this nice man came in the newsroom. He'd come in several times. He lived down by Bisbee, and he used to come and collect, because we get a lot of books at the Star for book reviews, and then we donate them to the libraries in Southern Arizona. And he was a volunteer, and he came in one day, he came by my desk, and he said, "I bombed you in World War II." In this German accent. I said, "What?" He said, "Yes, I was in the Luftwaffe," you know, which is the German Air Force. And so I went down to Bisbee and got his story and told about that, you know. And he was not a Nazi or part of the SS. He was a Luftwaffe pilot, you know, doing his job. And we thought, well, there's going to be a lot of objections, and there wasn't. In fact, there was a veterans group in Green Valley that invited him to come speak to them, you know. So, you know, it's got all different sides of the story.
How many books have you written since?
Well, if you don't count the cookbooks that we did for the food bank that I did with David Fitzsimmons, because I did little bios on different people in Tucson and their recipes, you know, it was a fundraiser. Just 2, and they're collections of my historical columns. The first was Another Tucson, published in 1991, and then Tucson Memories when was that published? 2006, I think. And I think they're both sold out now. But they were just collections of my columns, historical columns about Tucson.
Wow. What was the most important that you've read, and why?
Important?
The most important book that you've read?
Oh, a lot. I think To Kill a Mockingbird, obviously. It's a wonderful book. Do you guys read that here at school? Yeah, it's a wonderful book. A lot of lessons learned there. And probably the book that has stuck with me the most. In fact, my husband had to go buy me a hardcover copy for $40 because I lost my original one and I couldn't stand it. It was Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. Have you read that?
No, ma'am.
It's by Dee Brown. It's at least 25, 30 years old. And it's about, mainly about the Plains Indians in the mid and late 1800s when they were all being eradicated and put on reservations and dying of blizzards and malnutrition. And Wounded Knee was about one of the last battles they had. By that time, the Indians were so desperate that they had gotten in their heads that if they did this certain dance called a ghost dance, that somehow they would be saved, and they would be saved from the soldiers' bullets. And they danced this ghost dance even as they were being cut down. And this happened at Wounded Knee, and that's where the title came from, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. It's just a gripping story. It's just it's what we did to the Indians is just awful, just absolutely awful. And it's just wonderful, the stories and lots of photographs of some of these chiefs, because a lot of them went to Washington. The Great White Father they thought was their friend, and they had beautiful photographs taken of themselves in the full Indian headdress and everything. And it's a great book.
I'll have to read that one.
Yeah, it's not hard to read. It's divided in a lot of chapters. It's not like this long historical slog that's, you can like just read a chapter, because it's divided up by the different tribes and chiefs, and it's really gripping. They should have it in the library. If they don't have it, they should have it.
I'm gonna check that.
Yeah.
What is the most important accomplishment that you've done in your life, and why?
Raising my family. Still number one. Still number one. After my freshman year, I got married to the fellow I went to the Pueblo Fiesta with, and I quit school to help put him through. That's what women did back then, And so I worked at Tucson Electric in the basement there for 3 years until we started a family. And then when the kids got old enough, then I went back to school, and I would go to school a year, and then I'd have to quit because they needed a brownie leader, or they needed a spin mother, and this kind of stuff. And so I graduated from Pueblo in 1963, and I did not get my diploma from the U of A in journalism until December of 1981. Wow. So I tell people it took me 18 years to get through college. But I had a few interruptions. But it was worth it. It was worth it to be home with my kids when they were little. And they didn't have all the child care opportunities that they do now. They didn't have after-school programs at the elementary school, that kind of thing. And so it was really tough to do that, to go to school and be there when your 5-year-old comes home from kindergarten or whatever. So,
were there any obstacles in your life that made you question whether or not you would succeed, and what did you do?
Yeah, I doubted several times that I'd ever make it through school. I remember once, one of those times I talked about where I had to quit school, and I still remember walking to the registrar's office to withdraw. It was in Old Main, and this little old lady took care of me, and I had to withdraw from school. And I remember walking back to my car, and the tears were just streaming down my face. I am never going to get my college degree, because I knew then I wanted to be in journalism, and you had to have a group degree to be in journalism. And then when I went back to school, I would meet up with these sad-faced professors at the journalism department when I go to register, and they'd say, well, there are no jobs. This was right after Woodward Bernstein, the Watergate stuff, and all of a sudden everybody in the world wanted to be a journalist. They've since found out there's no money in it, so they're not lawyers or whatever. But at that time, everybody wanted to be a journalist, and so you had a lot of competition. And after I got my degree in 1981, December, it took me till the following May until I got a job, because nobody wanted. I really didn't have any experience other than working on the school newspapers. And finally, Ed Jewett, who was a publisher of Territorial Publishers on the Northwest Side, it was just a little weekly throwaway, he hired me as his secretary, and part of the time I did some reporting. And I was just an absolutely terrible secretary. Every time his wife would call, I would disconnect her. I couldn't type a business letter. And so after a while, he shifted me over full-time into journalism, into the newsroom, and everybody was a lot happier with that. But there was that time there, both when I thought I was never going to get my degree, and then that time when I thought I'm never going to get a job in journalism, those 2 times. Yeah. But they didn't last forever.
What are your new goals and dreams?
Well, now that I'm retired, I'm really kind of trying to find out my niche in life. Obviously, I'm not going to sit home and just watch soap operas all day long. I had just recently started volunteering with Literacy Volunteers of Tucson, and I'm helping in a couple of things there. One is the Job Path. These are people who come from foreign countries. Some are from Africa, some are from Mexico, and these are people who were professionals in their country. One's a doctor, one's a nurse, I think one's an attorney. And their only problem is they don't have a good command of English over here. They can speak French, they can speak Spanish, but they're having problems, of course, with English. They're learning it, and so I'm helping them with that, with their job resumes, and just talking, encouraging them to talk, that kind of thing. And then I'm also doing a thing for literacy volunteers where, back to reporting again, I'm doing little interviews with about 8 of their outstanding tutors, and we're going to publish it on their website, just little bios of them. So that's one thing, and I'm involved with the Arizona Historical Society. I'm on the state board, and I'm hoping next year, it's kind of a funny thing because we spend half the year in Sholo, in the White Mountains in the summer, and so I'm not here full time, so some agencies, they don't want you unless they've got a 12-month commitment, so I have to kind of see what's going on there, but I think next year I would like to also help out with Friends of the Tucson Public Library. Again, anything that has to do with books and reading and that kind of thing, those are my passions.
And who inspires you today?
Who inspires me today? President Obama, very much so, because he came from not a privileged background, and look where he is today. I also think he's a very smart man. Also, Gabby Giffords, of course. I liked her before, but now it's just amazing what she has done. And in that same vein, I would think the parents, and especially the mother of Christina Taylor Green, what she's done, because she could have just folded up in her grief, and instead she's created this wonderful foundation and written this book, and I know her daughter's proud of her.
Paul was actually donated to her foundation last fall.
Good, wonderful. Did she come here and talk to you about anything?
She came during one of our spirit assemblies, our fall spirit assembly.
Good, yeah, it's wonderful what she's doing. She has a lot of inner strength. You can see where her daughter got some of her personality, that's for sure.
Yes, ma'am. And that was our last question.
Okay.
And thank you so much for your time and for coming.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am.